Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. A quiet storm of betrayal, family dysfunction, and a woman forced to stand alone when the people closest to her chose to look the other way. It comes from someone I'll call Lila. She's 31, living in the small town of Ashfield, Maine, where the winters are long and memories linger. Just 3 months ago, she was supposed to be finalizing plans for a summer wedding. Instead, she found herself ripping apart the life she thought she was building with the man she loved. Lila had been away on a business trip for 5 days. When she came home, she found her fiancé, Troy, 34, naked in their bed with her sister, Melanie, who was supposed to be her maid of honor. Melanie is 30. Lila didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked out. Hours later, she told Troy to get his things out before the end of the week, or she'd get rid of them herself. He didn't, so she did. She hauled his things to the front yard, slapped a free sign on them, sold or donated anything he'd given her, and pawned the ring without a second thought. She blocked him on everything. But Troy didn't give up. He came to her door, pounding until the neighbors called the police. Then he showed up at her workplace and caused a scene, so she called the cops again. When Troy's parents arrived unannounced, begging her to talk to him, she told them to leave or she'd call the police on them too. As for Melanie, Lila's now former best friend and sister, she didn't go scorched earth. She didn't tell Melanie's husband what she saw. But word must have gotten out, because last Lila heard, Melanie was kicked out of her home and living with her parents again. Melanie tried to reach out, tried to spin the betrayal as a mistake worth understanding. When Lila refused, she called her cold-hearted and selfish. Lila cut her off permanently. "I don't want people in my life who shrug at betrayal," she wrote. All of this built up, burned quietly in her chest until it finally came out, one bitter evening over dinner with her parents. Her mother, Janine, is 62. Her father, Howard, is 64. They had been pleading with Lila to talk to Troy. "He's miserable," they said. "He loves you. He made a mistake. You owe it to him to listen, just 5 minutes." They said she was cruel for cutting him off, for calling the police, for embarrassing his family. They reminded her of how good his parents had been to her. That night Lila brought a date, Ben, someone kind and steady. But even his presence didn't stop her parents. They kept pushing, and Lila broke. She turned to her father and asked if he expected her to forgive every time a man cheated, like her mother had. Then she turned to her mother and asked how it felt, knowing most of the women she had lunch with had slept with her husband. She asked if this was the kind of life they wanted for her, for Melanie, for their daughters. She told them she still remembered what it felt like as a child, watching her dad come home late, always with an excuse, always smelling like another woman's perfume. She remembered weekends away, knowing they weren't work trips, but time spent with someone who wasn't her mother. Then she asked them, did they ever wonder why she was the only one of their 4 children who still talked to them? Did they not realize why they weren't invited to her brother's wedding? Why they'd never met his wife or their children? Did they really believe her sister's silence was just her being emotional? And then she stood. She looked them in the eyes and said, "Congratulations, you've now lost your last remaining child." And she walked out, alone. And I told them I hoped their arrogance, their willful blindness, and all the quiet misery they'd buried themselves in would be enough to keep them warm in their final days. Then I walked out. I left Ben, my poor date, sitting there, stunned and silent, probably wondering what he'd just walked into. I hadn't meant to use him as some kind of prop in a personal implosion. He'd ask me out that same morning. I'd half joked about dinner with my parents, not expecting him to actually agree. But he did. He smiled and said, "Worst case, I'll post your bail." After we left the restaurant, he took me to a dim little bar 2 blocks away. He didn't try to talk me out of my pain. He just sat with me, let me cry on his shoulder while I downed cheap whiskey until the room stopped spinning. He ordered fries. I didn't eat. He got me home safely and tucked me in with quiet kindness. The next morning, I woke up feeling raw and hollow. There was a knock on the door. A delivery. Double cheeseburger, large fries, large Sprite. No note, just the DoorDash sticker with his name. It made me cry harder than anything the night before. I didn't block my parents. I could have, but I didn't. It's been a week since that dinner, and the silence between us has stretched long and cold. I've calmed down enough now to feel something resembling regret, not for the things I said, but for the damage I saw on their faces when I said them. I hurt them, especially my mom. I could see it in her eyes before I walked out. Despite everything, despite the betrayal they encouraged me to forgive, the way they dismissed my pain, I still love them. That's the cruel twist of family. You can hate what they do to you and still ache when you know you've cut them down. I've been turning it all over in my head trying to understand why I lost it like that. And I think it wasn't just about Troy or Melanie. It was years of pain buried too deep, finally breaking the surface. They pushed me to forgive a man who destroyed me, who slept with my sister in our bed, who begged for mercy only after he was caught. And worse, they did it while pretending they hadn't lived the same cycle themselves. My father's affairs, my mother's silent endurance. All of it bubbling up, refusing to be ignored any longer. Some people online assumed Ben didn't know what he was walking into that night, but he did. I'd told him the basics, warned him it could get messy. He said he didn't mind, that he was good in chaos. He was, maybe too good. He handled everything like someone who's been through his own kind of heartbreak. And for the record, Troy and Melanie aren't the only names in my life. My sister, the other one, flew in the day after I found them together. She helped me while I screamed and threw things. My older brother and his wife helped me pack up all of Troy's junk. Another friend sat with me for hours while I sobbed in silence. The only reason I mention Troy and Melanie so much is because their betrayal is what cracked open everything I'd kept hidden for years. The people I loved most, my parents, my sister, acted like it was something to get over, like it wasn't a fire that burned through everything I thought was safe. So, no, I don't feel guilty about what I said. I feel guilty that it had to be said at all, that I had to break them to protect myself, that I had to draw a line so thick it might never be erased. People online said Ben sounded like a great guy, and he is, but I'm trying to be careful, trying not to rush into something just because he was kind when I needed it. Still, it's hard not to wonder what it meant, sitting beside a woman unraveling in front of her parents, and then showing up the next day with cheeseburgers and no expectations. Maybe that's what hope looks like now. Quiet, simple, a meal at the door when you're too sad to ask for help. The comments people left after I shared my story stuck with me longer than I expected. Some were blunt, some were cruel, but a few felt like warm hands in the dark. One woman, who called herself Ellie, wrote, "I grew up in dysfunction. Reading what you said to your parents made me want to applaud you. They finally saw themselves through your eyes. They can't erase that now." She hoped the silence from them meant they'd told Troy it was over, that I was no longer reachable, no longer their bridge to redemption. Another comment from someone named Ruth joked that I should DoorDash Ben a cookie cake as a thank you for enduring the chaos of that dinner. She called him a good egg, and I smiled at that, because he was. He is. Most people agreed that my parents owed me a real apology, one that didn't come wrapped in guilt or manipulation. They said I should hold the line, the same way my siblings had. And yes, it hurt to admit that I was the last one still holding on. There were a few that stung for the wrong reasons. Strangers telling me to stop being so emotional, telling me men make mistakes, that I should have supported Troy through his moment of weakness. A few suggested I had pushed him to cheat by being too distant, too career-focused, too strong-willed. One man even messaged me offering to teach me how to be a proper wife. Another told me my reaction made it obvious I was a serial cheater, and that Troy should have used a cattle prod on my happy place. That one made me nauseous, but it also made something in me snap back into place. These weren't people to listen to. These were warnings, flags that confirmed I had done the right thing by walking away from anyone who shared that mindset, family or not. It's been a while since that post. Life moved forward even when it felt like I couldn't. Work kept me busy, my siblings kept checking in, Ben kept showing up. But the biggest shift came unexpectedly. It was a Thursday night. I was about to head to bed when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my mother was standing there with 2 suitcases and eyes so hollow it frightened me. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside and let her in. She looked small somehow. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't know how to exist in the space. She didn't say she'd left my father. She didn't need to. I saw it in the way her shoulders slumped and how her eyes kept flicking toward the floor. I made her tea, then pulled a blanket around her. She didn't cry. I did. Later that night, I made her sleep in my bed with me. I don't know why. Maybe I just didn't want her to feel as alone as she looked. Maybe I didn't want to feel alone either. She fell asleep quickly, her breathing shallow and fragile. Lying there beside her, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. My mother had no one, no friends, no support system, just decades of silence, shame, and a husband who never valued her. And when she finally reached her breaking point, she turned to the daughter she'd spent years pushing away. That broke me more than anything Troy or Melanie ever did. I wondered if one of us had said something sooner. Would she have left earlier? Would she have found her voice? Or were we all just playing parts in a family that learned to endure instead of speak? My siblings came within days. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. The love was there, even after everything. And for a moment, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt full, like healing wasn't just a fantasy, but something we might actually reach for. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was something close. I didn't fully understand how alone my mother was until I saw her standing in my doorway with those 2 worn suitcases and that hollow look in her eyes. In that moment, it hit me like a weight in my chest. She had no one left, no friends, no support system, just silence behind her and uncertainty in front of her. And I began to wonder if that had always been the case. Had she lived those years in quiet isolation, enduring my father's betrayals in solitude? Would we, her children, have failed to notice her drowning because we were too busy trying to survive our own wounds? Would she have found the strength to leave earlier if one of us had said something, anything, sooner? I had never seen her like that before. My mother, Janine, was always so composed, so proper. Even when my father's affairs were obvious, she wore grace like armor. But now she looked like someone who had lost her map, her voice, and maybe even her will. It frightened me. I couldn't let her sleep on the couch, not like that, so I made up the bed, climbed in beside her, and held her while she slept like a ghost, quiet and still, as if she was afraid to be real. The next morning I called my siblings. No explanations were needed. Within days, my sister Celia was with us. She crawled into bed with us the second night, wrapping her arms around Mom and whispering, "You're not alone anymore." My brothers flew in a few days later. For a brief window, we were all under one roof again, grown now, changed by life and pain, but still bound to her. She stayed with me for a while after that. I did what I could, cooked for her, talked when she needed it, stayed quiet when she didn't. But it was clear she wasn't just heartbroken. She was unraveling. The years had hollowed her out, and she didn't know how to fill the space. I worried constantly when I wasn't home. I couldn't afford to take time off work, but every time I locked the door behind me, I felt like I was abandoning a child. Then I had an idea. It might sound small, but it mattered. I took her to the local animal shelter. I thought maybe a puppy would bring some joy, something that needed her attention, something that would force her to stay tethered to the world. Instead of a puppy, she fell in love with an awkward 5-year-old mutt with floppy ears and big dumb eyes. He waddled right up to her, put his paw on her knee, and leaned in like he knew she needed him. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. We brought him home that day. That dog, Oscar, is a mess. He got his head stuck between the stair railings one night and howled until we called the fire department. My mother didn't even scold him. She cooed at him like he was a baby. Now she calls him her little boy, and he follows her from room to room like he's afraid she'll disappear. A few weeks later, my oldest brother, Nolan, offered to take her in. He lives across the country with his wife and 3 kids. He thought the distance would help, that she'd heal faster if there was no chance of running into Dad or one of his many flings. So she moved. He set her up in a separate in-law suite and found her a therapist. I hear from him often. Mom's doing better. She's wrapped herself around those grandkids, spoils them endlessly, and insists on walking Oscar twice a day. As for my father, he hasn't changed. When he invited me to dinner not long after Mom moved, I reluctantly went. He introduced me to the new woman in his life, someone I recognized instantly. She used to call my mother her best friend. I looked her straight in the eye and asked if she remembered those holiday dinners, those afternoons at our house, and if she'd been sleeping with him back then too. It was tense. My father called me the next day to tell me how disappointed he was. I told him the feeling was mutual. We argued. He made excuses, claimed he wasn't as bad as I made him out to be. I cut the call short and blocked his number. About a month ago, he showed up at my door. I didn't let him in. He seemed shaken. He said he didn't want to lose me too. And here's the truth. I don't want to lose him either. He's still my dad. I love him, and that's the worst part. He promised he'd keep his personal life separate. So far, he has. We've had a couple quiet outings. Simple, cordial, not warm, but not cruel. Meanwhile, I started therapy. And it's breaking me in ways I didn't expect. Therapy has a way of digging into parts of you that you didn't even know were bruised. Some sessions leave me gutted, raw, and hollow, like I've been turned inside out. On those days, all I want is to disappear into the back booth of some quiet bar and drink until I forget the sound of my own voice, until I forget what it feels like to speak the truth out loud. But I keep going, even when it hurts, even when I hate it. Even when I walk out of the building and cry in my car for 20 minutes before I can drive home. I used to think I was fine, that I'd survived everything with some strength left in me. But therapy showed me I hadn't survived. I'd just adapted. I'd grown around the damage. And now I was finally trying to undo the knots. Some days I wonder why anyone chooses this willingly. But it is helping. Now for the part most of you have been waiting for. The update about Ben. It's strange. I wrote that first post thinking I was just shouting into the void, but the number of messages I got asking about him, it was overwhelming. So many people barely commented on the betrayal or the family fallout. Instead, they asked, "But what happened with the cheeseburger guy?" I hadn't replied to any of those questions. It wasn't about him, not originally. But maybe I do owe you something because, in some quiet, unexpected way, you all played a part in what came next. Ben reached out a few weeks after I posted. He'd come across a podcast on YouTube that referenced the story, my story. He sent me a message with a link and one simple line. "Is this you?" I was mortified, utterly paralyzed by the thought that he'd read every messy, painful detail. So I didn't respond. I couldn't. I buried my head in the sand and ignored every follow-up he sent for weeks. When I finally opened his messages, I found a long thread filled with screenshots of kind, supportive comments from strangers. Things people had said about the dinner, about me, about him. Words like legend and green flag and that guy's a keeper. I didn't have to ask why he sent them. He wanted me to know he wasn't scared off. Eventually, I wrote back. We tried to find time to meet again, but it was hard. Life kept getting in the way. I was juggling work, therapy, my mom's healing, and all the emotional fallout of everything that had happened. He had his own world, his job, his commitments. We managed a few quick coffee meetups, nothing more. I didn't think we were going to make it past polite check-ins. But Ben is persistent in the gentlest way. He kept showing up, kept texting, kept asking, "When are you free?" And eventually we went on a second date, then a third. Then one afternoon he took me to meet his grandparents. His grandfather, Dean, carves little wooden animals. Their whole sunroom is filled with them, tiny flocks of wooden birds perched on every windowsill. His grandmother, Ruth, thinks I'm too thin. She feeds me every time I visit and sends me home with Tupperware containers full of soup, rice pudding, and homemade cornbread. I haven't had to cook for myself on a Sunday in weeks. Ben gets along with my siblings, which honestly still shocks me. He even came with me to visit my mom on her birthday. She was quiet, unsure, but he was patient. He brought her flowers and talked to her like she mattered. It meant more than he probably knows. In my phone, I saved his name as Cheeseburger. He noticed, gave me a hard time about it, said it wasn't fair when he bought me a double cheeseburger. So I started calling him Double Cheese, eventually shortened it to DC. But I never changed the contact name. He's still Cheeseburger. He's also a Swiftie. I didn't see that coming. I don't dislike Taylor Swift, but I never pictured him singing along to Enchanted. At first, he blamed his little sister and niece. Now, he just blames me. I don't mind. If being his cover for Taylor Swift fandom means he keeps showing up for me, I'll wear that badge with pride. I don't know where it's going. I'm still healing, still raw in places I didn't know were torn. But when I look at him, when I think about that cheeseburger he sent on my worst day, I feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The messages haven't stopped even after all this time. Most of them are warm, encouraging, from people who've lived through their own heartbreak and come out the other side. One woman wrote, "I wish I had your courage. I wish I could have said to my parents what you said to yours." That comment stuck with me. Not because I think what I did was brave, but because I know how much it hurt afterward. Speaking the truth, when it's been buried for years, doesn't make you feel powerful. It makes you feel exposed, vulnerable, like every nerve is on the outside of your skin. Still, I'm glad I said it. And I'm glad my mom is finally somewhere safe. She's learning how to exist outside the shadow of my father. And my dad, well, I don't know if he's learned anything, really. But I think he knows now that I'm his last chance, the only one of his children still speaking to him. And maybe that fear is keeping him just cautious enough not to destroy whatever thread remains between us. People keep saying that Ben, DC, is a keeper, that if we get married someday, our first date will be the wildest, most awkward origin story ever. Sometimes I imagine telling our kids about it, sitting on the floor in the living room with a cup of cocoa in my hand, laughing at how their dad just quietly sipped his drink while I detonated a decade's worth of pain across a restaurant table. But those are just daydreams for now. What I'm trying to do, what we're both trying to do, is move slowly. Heal first. We've talked about it. He knows I'm still in therapy, still figuring out who I am without all the damage. He respects that, never pushes. He just keeps showing up with steady patience and gentle presence. One commenter said, "It seems like everyone's making progress except your father." And that's the truth. When I look around, at my mom with her rescue dog, and my nieces curled up beside her, at my siblings rebuilding our bond, at Ben making my grandmother's cornbread recipe just to surprise me, I see movement, growth, softness returning to places that used to feel hard and closed off. But my dad, he just continues being who he's always been, detached, charming in public, empty in private. He didn't seem all that shaken by the end of his marriage. 35 years, gone, and he barely flinched. It didn't surprise me. It did, however, break my heart all over again for my mother. She gave him her life, and he treated it like an old shirt, worn, comfortable, and easy to discard when it no longer fit his image. As for Troy, the man I was supposed to marry, he's not even a whisper in my thoughts anymore. Some people asked for updates on him, whether karma had caught up to him, if he'd lost his job, his place, his dignity. But honestly, I wouldn't know. I haven't looked, haven't asked. He's not a blip on my radar. That's the strange part of healing, I think. You expect it to be some big moment of forgiveness or revenge or closure. But for me, healing looks like indifference, like forgetting his birthday, like no longer caring if he's miserable or fine. That's how I know I've moved on. And yes, Ben is still saved in my phone as Cheeseburger. He knows it. He rolls his eyes every time he sees it. But I think, secretly, he loves it. That moment, when he sent me food the day after everything fell apart, was the beginning of something I didn't believe I'd ever have again. Comfort, safety, affection with no strings attached. So wherever life takes me from here, I'm just trying to hold on to that quiet steadiness. Not rushing, not forcing anything, just letting the good things stay while I continue to clean out the pain. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that survival isn't the same as healing. Survival is instinct. Healing takes choice, effort, and it hurts, but it also frees you. After everything, I realize now that it was never just about food. It was about being seen, about someone caring enough to ask, to respect the small lines that keep us unraveling in the chaos of shared space. I wasn't being selfish, no matter how much my roommate tried to twist it that way. Leftovers, in a strange way, are like little plans for comfort. A warm lunch you look forward to after a long morning. So yes, it hurt when I came home to find my carefully packed pasta half gone, again. I gave her another chance to understand, to talk through it. I kept my voice calm, told her it wasn't about the snacks, it was about the disregard, the assumption, the way she never even thought to ask. But instead of apologizing, she scoffed, told me I was overreacting, that I needed to chill. So I did something petty. I labeled everything in the fridge with a Sharpie, including a single grape. Just one, sitting there with my name in all caps. Strangely, it worked. Things are quiet now. We're civil, but distant. She hasn't touched my food since. She even started buying her own snacks, and though it's the bare minimum, it still feels like progress. For now. I'm calling that a win. A quiet one. I'm not sure where things go from here. Maybe we'll learn to live around each other. Maybe not. But I'm grateful for the voices that reminded me it's okay to expect decency. That drawing a line doesn't make you dramatic, it makes you human. And yes, the grape is still there. It's shriveled now, but it stays. A quiet reminder that even a single grape deserves a boundary. In the story of Lila's unraveling, one truth becomes painfully clear. Emotional harm doesn't always come from explosive betrayals. Sometimes it seeps in quietly through small repeated dismissals, manipulations, or unspoken expectations. Whether it's a cheating partner, a dismissive parent, or a roommate who thinks your boundaries are optional, it all chips away at your self-worth. That's why protecting your boundaries isn't just an act of self-respect, it's an act of survival. If you're in a relationship or family dynamic that makes you question your right to be hurt, stop and listen to yourself. Do you feel small, unheard, dismissed? Those are signs that something deeper is broken. And no amount of denial can fix what someone else keeps breaking. The hardest part isn't walking away, it's believing you deserve to. But like Lila, sometimes the healing starts when you stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace and finally speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others. And if you're in recovery, emotionally, mentally, relationally, take your time. Seek help. Be in therapy if you can. Reclaim the space you were told to shrink from. One grape, one truth, one Sharpie-drawn boundary at a time. You are not too much. You are just surrounded by people who wanted you to be less. You deserve more.